You know what's happening in Chicago right now? Something that nobody saw coming. And if you're an immigrant living in the US, you need to hear this. People are leaving. Not because they're being physically removed, but because they're choosing to go. Self-deportation. It sounds almost impossible, right? Why would anyone leave voluntarily after working so hard to build a life here? But here's the thing. ICE enforcement has ramped up in ways we haven't seen in years. Chicago, a city that once proudly called itself a sanctuary, is now at the center of one of the most intense immigration crackdowns in recent memory. And the pressure? It's real. Families are scared. Workers are looking over their shoulders. And some have decided that leaving on their own terms is better than waiting for that knock on the door. Now, I know what you're thinking. Is this really happening? How bad is it? That's exactly what we're diving into today. Because this isn't just about Chicago. This is a signal of what could be coming to cities across the country. And whether you're documented, undocumented, waiting for your green card, or supporting someone who is, this affects you. We're going to break down what's actually happening on the ground. Why are people making this impossible choice? What's ICE doing differently? And most importantly, what does this mean for you and your family moving forward? I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to make sure you have the facts, because in times like these, information is power. Knowing what's happening, understanding your options, and being prepared, that's how we protect ourselves and the people we love. So stick with me for the next few minutes. We're going to cover everything you need to know, the real stories, the numbers, and the strategies people are using to navigate this moment. And hey, if you find this information helpful, do me a favor and hit that like button. It helps more people in our community find this video when they need it most. Let's support each other through this. All right, let's get into it. What's really going on in Chicago right now? Because this story is bigger than most people realize. If you've been watching the news or scrolling through social media, you've probably seen snippets here and there, raids, deportations, families being separated. But what's happening in Chicago is different. It's quieter in some ways, but just as devastating. People aren't waiting around to see what happens next. They're making the heartbreaking decision to leave before they're forced to. And I want you to understand something. These aren't people who came here yesterday. We're talking about families who have been living in Chicago for 10, 15, 20 years. Kids who were born here. Parents who own businesses, who pay taxes, who are part of the fabric of their neighborhoods. But the fear has become so overwhelming that they're packing up everything they've built and going back to countries they haven't seen in decades. Some are going back to places they barely remember. So what changed? Why now? Well, I see. That's Immigration and Customs Enforcement has significantly intensified its operations in Chicago over the past several months. And when I say intensified, I mean they're not just targeting people with criminal records anymore. They're expanding their reach. Workplace raids are back. They're showing up at homes early in the morning. They're waiting outside courthouses, outside schools, outside churches. Places where people used to feel somewhat safe are no longer off limits. Now, Chicago has always had this reputation as a sanctuary city, right? That term gets thrown around a lot, and I want to make sure we are all on the same page about what it actually means. A sanctuary city is basically a place where local law enforcement isn't supposed to cooperate with federal immigration authorities. The idea was to create spaces where immigrants could report crimes, send their kids to school, and go about their lives without constantly fearing deportation. But here's the reality: that protection only goes so far. Federal agents don't need local police cooperation to do their job. And when the federal government decides to ramp up enforcement, sanctuary policies can only do so much. And that's exactly what we're seeing. ICE has made it crystal clear that they're not asking for permission. They're coming in with their own teams, their own intelligence, and their own agenda. The number of arrests has skyrocketed. We're talking about hundreds of people being detained in the Chicago area in just a matter of months. And it's not just the arrests that are causing panic. It's the way they're happening. Imagine you're dropping your kids off at school and you see ICE vehicles parked nearby. Imagine you're at work and agents walk in asking for identification. That kind of fear doesn't just affect the person being arrested. It ripples through entire communities. And this is where the self-deportation piece comes in, because people are doing a cost-benefit analysis in their heads. They're asking themselves, do I wait and hope I don't get caught? Do I risk being detained, maybe separated from my children, possibly deported to a country where I have nothing left? Or do I leave now on my own terms, with some dignity and control over the situation? For a growing number of families, that second option is starting to look like the safer bet. I've been reading stories from community organizations in Chicago, and they're heartbreaking. There's one story about a woman who had been living in Chicago for 18 years. She had 3 kids, all U.S. citizens. She owned a small restaurant that was doing well, but after ICE showed up at a business down the street from hers, she couldn't sleep anymore. Every day felt like a countdown. So she made the decision to close her restaurant, sell everything she could, and take her kids back to Mexico. Her kids, by the way, had never even been to Mexico before. They don't speak Spanish fluently. Their entire lives are in Chicago, but she felt like she had no choice. And she's not alone. Immigration attorneys in the area are reporting that more and more clients are coming to them not to fight deportation cases, but to ask about voluntary departure. That's the legal term for self-deportation. It's basically saying, I'll leave on my own. Just don't put this on my record in a way that makes it impossible for me to ever come back legally. Because here's the thing, if you're deported by force, it becomes incredibly difficult to return to the U.S. legally in the future. But if you leave voluntarily, you at least have a chance. It's a slim chance, but it's something. And for people who are desperate to keep hope alive, that matters. Now, I want to pause here for a second and talk about what this means for the broader immigrant community across the United States. Because Chicago is not an isolated case. What's happening there is part of a larger national trend. ICE has been given more resources, more personnel, and broader authority to carry out enforcement operations. And while Chicago is making headlines right now, similar crackdowns are happening in other major cities too. Los Angeles, New York, Houston, Phoenix, these aren't hypothetical scenarios anymore. This is the reality on the ground. And if you're watching this video and you're thinking, okay, but I'm doing everything right. I have work authorization. I'm following the rules. I need you to understand that the environment of fear affects everyone. Even people with legal status are getting caught up in this. There have been cases of U.S. citizens being detained because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time, or because their documentation wasn't immediately accessible. The stress, the anxiety, the constant looking over your shoulder, that's the lived experience for millions of people right now. So what can you do? How do you protect yourself and your family in this climate? First and foremost, know your rights. This is not a luxury, it's a necessity. You have rights regardless of your immigration status. You have the right to remain silent. You do not have to open your door if ICE shows up without a warrant signed by a judge. You do not have to answer questions about where you were born or what your status is. Carry a Know Your Rights card with you at all times. There are organizations that provide these for free, and they can literally be the difference between being detained and walking away. Second, have a plan. I know that sounds scary, and I wish we lived in a world where this wasn't necessary, but we have to be realistic. If you have children, make sure there's someone who can take care of them if something happens to you. Have important documents in a safe place that someone you trust can access. Know who your emergency contacts are. Have the number of an immigration attorney saved in your phone. These might seem like small things, but in a moment of crisis, they become everything. Third, stay connected to your community. There are organizations out there doing incredible work to support immigrants right now. Legal aid societies, community centers, churches, advocacy groups. They're offering free consultations, know your rights workshops, and even accompaniment services where volunteers will go with you to ICE check-ins. You are not alone in this. There are people who want to help, and reaching out is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. And listen, if you're finding this information valuable, if you think someone else in your life needs to hear this, please share this video. Hit that like button so YouTube knows to recommend this to more people who need it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because I'm committed to keeping you updated on what's happening with immigration policy and enforcement. We need to look out for each other, and part of that is making sure the right information gets to the right people. So take 2 seconds and help spread the word. Now, I also want to address something that I know some of you might be feeling right now: hopelessness. It's easy to look at everything that's happening and feel like the walls are closing in. But here's what I need you to remember: communities are resilient. Immigrants have always been resilient. Throughout history, people have faced unimaginable challenges and found ways to survive, to adapt, to push forward. And while I can't promise you that things are going to get easier tomorrow, I can promise you that giving up is not the answer. Stay informed, stay connected, and keep fighting for your place here, because you deserve to be here. Your contributions matter. Your stories matter. And no amount of enforcement operations can erase the value that you bring to this country. So let's keep supporting each other. Let's keep sharing information. And let's keep holding on to hope even when it feels impossible. That's how we get through this together.